All right. Shukran for your inputs, and we're going to ask Imam Hussein to make an opening dua for us. Kanala.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asrafil mursaleen. Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Rabbi zidni ilma warzuqna fahma. Allahumma arhamna arham والدينا ارحم أولادنا ارحم أقربائنا ارحم أصدقائنا وارحم إخواننا في الله واشفي مرضانا وارحم موتانا وارحم أمة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. ربنا تقبل منا بسر سورة الفاتحة. الحمد لله رب العالمين.
Any opening words or comments you wish to make before we start, Imam Hussein?
تفضل بالتماني. تفضل.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وأصحابه وبارك وسلم. Welcome everyone. I hope you've had a different but a very spiritual Eid. May Allah make this period that we are going through a period of renewal, a period wherein we become more conscious of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, and that the lessons that we've learned in this lockdown and in this period will serve to make us of those slaves who get closer to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. Ameen. Now, we've dealt with the Sifaat of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, and we of being all-seeing. What we've done, and I want to just have a quick reminder of what we've done so far. Not going to go through all of it. We went through the Sifaat of Allah being all-seeing. Now, one of the reasons why we do what we are doing is to ensure that we look at Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala and try and follow the advice that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala gives us directly. Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala tells us what we should look for in order to get closer to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Now, the Sifaat are easier to understand if we look at the question of the signs, looking at the signs of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Now, the signs of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala should be things that we look around. Allah says in the Quran that we must look at the heavens and the earth, and we must also look at those things within ourselves that can remind us of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Now, these signs are supposed to do what? When we look at the things in creation around us, it should give us an idea of how truly wonderful Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is. We looked at the ear, we looked at power, we looked at the eye, and if we see what a marvelous organ the eye is, then subhanallah, it should evoke a feeling of awe, a feeling of recognizing the greatness of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala when we look at who is the creator of this thing that we call the eye. Now, I am just quickly going to go to a recap of what the eye is very quickly, because we want to get on to some of the other Sifaat of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. But now I'm just struggling with the with the internet here. Let me just see. As a reminder for ourselves, you see, now I'm struggling here with the internet now. Let me just call my granddaughter, my technical assistant. 1 second. Just come help me here quickly.
I'm here.
Yes, Kotha, just help me get the slide.
Yes. What do you mean get the slide?
Get the slide on the screen.
You know you're doing it wrong.
What
You
am I
didn't share it.
No,
You
I
didn't
didn't
share the
share it.
screen.
Okay, no, but I want
There
that.
you go. Does that work now?
Yeah, okay. All right, that's
Okay.
fine. Shukran, my girl.
Okay.
I hope you will forgive me for my ignorance. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala often reminds us that when we think we know, Allah shows us how little we know. When we think we can do, even if we are used to doing it and we have certain abilities, we must never ever take it for granted. And this is just my reminder. Don't think you are clever. So alhamdulillah. So what we're going to do, just a quick recap of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all-seeing. This is an example of what we said is, it's a microscope. A microscope is to show us that there are things, no matter how great our sight is, that there are things that are so small which are not visible to our eyes. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can see what not even the microscopes can see. Then I went to show you about the telescope, that there are things so far away which we can't see, that is visible and known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then we explained about how the eye works. And just a quick recap on that. The eye is an organ that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala designed, where the light that comes into the eye falls at the back of the eye, the retina, which is made up of all these different photosensitive cells or light sensitive cells. When the light falls on the cell, what the cell actually does, it takes the changes in light and it converts it to very, very, very small electrical impulses. And the electrical impulses are sent to the brain, and the brain interprets that as sight. Now, if we just look at that, subhanallah, that Allah created an organ that is able to take the changes in light and actually converts it to small little impulses. what that actually does say to us in a different way is that the eye doesn't actually see. If you take the eye on its own, it will convert those changes of light into small little impulses. But it is actually the brain that sees. It is also the brain that hears. So yes, the eye converts the light, but the eye is not the thing that sees. You actually see with the brain. I thought that would be an important point to make at this stage. We've dealt with that before, but we're going to just go on. The only point I wish to say in addition to that is the light that we see is but a very, very small component of the complete spectrum of light. Light is part of what we call the electromagnetic wave, and there's a small piece in the middle where the screen shows. I don't know if you'll be able to see this small piece here, where you see the arrow. That's all that is visible to us. Either side of that, you get ultraviolet, and then you get infrared, and that we can't see. And the thing to note is only this point that I wish to make, is that that wave that carries this information actually travels at the speed of 300,000 kilometers per second. Light travels 300,000 kilometers per second. I've made this point, but I'm repeating it because it's a useful piece of information. When we look at light, we can marvel at Allah Subhanahu wa Taala as the creator of light, that if we look at the circumference of the earth, the circumference of the earth is 40,000 kilometers. If you go right around the complete planet, then it is 40,000 kilometers. And we are able to travel if we travel at the speed of light, we can go around the earth 7.5 times. 7.5 times in 1 second, completely around the earth, if we travel at the speed of light. Subhanallah. Now that is something that I think we should remember, and I am not going to go further, but just to remind you that is it. Now we left it at how Allah Subhanahu wa Taala sees. We've covered some of this previously. But the point to remember here, I think, is that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala was all-seeing before creation came into existence. Allah Subhanahu wa Taala could see anything and everything before creation, when Allah Subhanahu wa Taala was completely alone and there was absolutely nothing else. Allah Subhanahu wa Taala was already all-seeing. Nothing had to come into existence for Allah to see it. Why are we saying that? Or logically, is that if it means that Allah only sees when there is something to be seen, then it means when that thing is not there, it means that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is not seen. What that would mean is that there is a need for Allah to see. There must be something that can be seen. Do we understand that point? That need for something to be in existence in order to be seen is not something that can ever apply to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I would want people to ponder on this point so that when we throw it up for questions, that people are clear about this point, because it will help us understand many other things when we talk about the Sifaat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Somebody's trying to come through and is battling. Ik wil gewoon mijn technical assistant gauw vir jou roep. Will you just half a second? Half a second. Hold on. Hold on. Or speak to you directly. Yes. So at this stage, I just want to ask, do we understand the concept that even before we were born, Allah was already all-seeing? Before Allah created the universe, Allah was all-seeing. Can I just pause on that point and find out whether people are clear about that point, or whether we can go on, or whether I should clarify that point? I'm opening it up to anyone who would like to pose a question for clarification on that point.
Yeah, it's Salie. It's just, if you go back to beginninglessness and endlessness, Allah is without beginning, without end, and that would automatically means that His seeing is without beginning, without end. So before anything came into existence or was created, Allah had the Sifaat already. Is that a correct understanding?
Very, very, very useful point to assist us to understand the concept. Can I just find out from the other people whether the concept is clear, based on the further elaboration also what Imam Hussein has given us now?
All-seeing. Allah is all-seeing. Allah sien. Kan ek op my input gee?
Yeah, please. Let's hear Amina.
Oh. Nee, ek het nou net gedink van Allah is all-seeing. Allah sien die donkerste nag en die donkerste, hoe sê hulle, as dit nou as swart muur, swart black ant in die donkerste nag, en Allah sien alles. Ek kan dit nie nou lekker.
Yeah, no, we understand the point, but what I want to know is, the ant is not there. Does Allah see the ant?
Yes, Allah see the ant.
But the ant is not there. There's no ant, in fact. Do you understand how it's easy to say what Allah can see, because we use it on our understanding? If you're talking about seeing, normally in the world, then there is somebody who's looking at something and seeing something, but there is something else that's being seen. If there isn't something, can I, for example, see my house if there is no house in front of me?
If there's
or if not even built? I'm going to build a house. Can I see the house?
Okay, nou verstaan.
Okay, let me make it easier. Let me make it easier. You see, if we look at a worldly example, then something has to be present for it to be observed or to be seen normally in a worldly environment. But which means the one thing needs the other. That is which we are looking at must be there for us to see it. Otherwise, we can't see it. If it's not there, how can we see it? But that means that we need that thing to be there for us to see.
But not for
Now,
Allah.
in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's case, that would mean that Allah needs for that thing to be there before Allah can see it. And that can never apply to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Syukuran kita Manie. Nou verstaan ik. Syukuran. Subhanallah.
Is there anyone else who would like to maybe ask a question or make a comment? If not, then yes?
I would suppose that man needs all the kinds of technology to be able to see what the naked eye can't see, and we need to see the things that are created, but Allah can see things before it's created, and Allah can see even in our hearts, like you said in the note that I've read, even the darkest corner of your heart, Allah can see what is hidden there.
Let me make the we know what Allah can see. Allah can see small, big, dark, light, whatever limits us from seeing, Allah can see that. But the point that I'm making here, that I'm hoping that people will understand, is the fact that something need not be present before Allah can see it. Why? Because Allah is not dependent on time. On time. So something needn't happen first for Allah to know or to see or to hear anything. Allah could hear, see, do anything before there was even creation. It's not an easy thing, but I want you to ponder on it so that we can we can come back, because it's important to understand this concept properly, because it will help you with other matters as we go further along the line, inshallah.
Inshallah.
I'm going to go to the next area now, if you will allow me. How do we emulate? How do we emulate al-Basir? Now, to emulate is the what's the name on the share screen on?
No, Buta Salie.
Is it not on?
Not on.
Ek vat elke week 'n koers by my kleinkind om hoe om die goedes te doen, en ek kry dit nooit reggie. Is it on now?
Yes.
On.
Yes.
Okay. Emulating we said means to imitate, to copy. Al-Basir, the all-seeing. How do we take Allah's Sifaats and use it to make us better people? Now, one of the things that here it applies to men, when we look at the question of people who are inappropriately dressed, And we know men are like people who are almost at tennis matches. The head goes from the one side to the other while they're driving. As they look at the women, wherever they see the women, die kop gaan van een kant na die ander kant. Now, that is one of the big problems when it comes to us as people, how we use our sight as human beings. But the other thing that is also a problem, we must protect our gaze. That is one of the things that we should do. But even women and men, when there are opposite sexes at a social gathering, then we're also tempted to look at people with a different eye. And we must avoid any gathering or place where we know that there is going to be a problem of people becoming a distraction to us. Because controlling your eyes to look at the right things is not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing. And very few people actually succeed with this. In fact, Imam Ghazali, radiallahu anh, says to us that the one who is able to lower his gaze, now that refers primarily to men, but also to women, that the reward of that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you the sweetness of worship. Sweetness, we will taste it, we will feel the benefit and the barakah if we are able to control our gaze. So may Allah make us of those people who will be able to control our gaze, inshallah. Then comes the other part of this, that when now here's me and the dingus again. The technology again. Allah, ek moet regtig 'n kos doen in die dinge. Do you have the screen up there in front of you that says continued on top?
Yes, Peter
Yes.
Manie.
Okay. Now, the one thing that we must remember is that it is not only what you look at that can be a distraction to you with respect to people from the opposite sexes. That is clearly a big one. But there's also the problem of people who observe things that's not right. And they walk past it and say, it's either not our business or they couldn't care one way or the other. And we know, we are taught, whatever we see that's wrong, there are three things we should do. We all know this, but I'm repeating it. The first thing that we should do is to stop it if we can. If we see anything is wrong around us, we should stop it. Whether a man is abusing his wife or is kicking the dog, doesn't matter. You must stop it if you can. But if for whatever reason you feel you are not able to stop it, then the next best thing that you should do is to speak out against it. And if you can't speak out against it, then the third thing that you should do, which is the weakest form, is to at least recognize that it is wrong, and tell yourself that it's wrong and it's things that you should avoid in your own life. Of course, we can't go and do things that put our safety and security at risk. If you see somebody doing something wrong and you just jump in there, Allah doesn't expect us to put ourselves at risk like that. We must do whatever it is that we feel under the circumstances that we are able to do. Now, the third thing is, if we observe hardship, whatever form of hardship, whether it's people walking the streets, living on the streets, or people are hungry, or you hear about people who are in difficulty, then we should, as Muslims, try and bring relief to those people. We have an obligation as Muslims to assist where we can. And often we find excuses or reasons, especially when it comes to the people who live on the streets. We say, no, they are drunk, they could have made an effort, or they should go work, and so on. We must remember Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is also their creator. Allah is the one who has to give us rizq and them rizq. We can't walk past these things as if it doesn't concern us. So where we can help, we must help. And at the very least, if we can't help, then what we should do is have a feeling of wanting to help, having a feeling of compassion, so that when Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala observes our difficulties, our hardships, we are going to want to get Allah to respond to our difficulties. When we do it to the rest of the creation, we open the door for Allah's rahmah and mercy to descend on us. Then maybe the last point to make is that if we are aware that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is all-seeing, and like the Amin reminded us, that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is the one who can see in the darkest night a black ant on a black rock. Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala can see in the deepest corners of our heart. Whatever we are thinking, Allah knows. Whatever we are feeling, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala knows. Whatever we are doing, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala knows. There's no place where we can hide or things that we can do to keep it away from Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Yet we do things that we know is wrong. Are we not aware that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is seeing and knowing what goes on in our lives, in our actions, in our minds, and even in our hearts? So if we become aware and we accept that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is the one who is all-seeing in a true way, then we will try and avoid doing things that's wrong, because Allah is the one who is watching every single moment, every single second, not just of other things, but of every single individual, regardless of who they are. I want to, on this Sifaat, conclude on that point and just find out if there's any comments before we go to the last of these attributes, which is the all-speaking, the one who speaks, Al-Kalam. But before I do that, I want to just hear if there's anything that anyone wishes to say at this stage. Is there anyone who wishes to make a comment or wishes to say anything at this stage?
No, alhamdulillah, it's just a lot to think on and ponder on.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, I think it's it's more a question of looking at what was said and then taking that and asking ourselves, how much have we learned from this Sifaat to make us better people? Now, if we just look at the two previous Sifaat, all hearing how we use our ears, especially when it comes to slander and backbiting and so on. And in this case, how we observe hardship and difficulties of others and how we respond. And being aware that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is watching our every moment that we are around. So it's the take home. What must I improve on? And for all of us, there are areas that we can improve on, for all of us. But take back some of what we have said here and apply it to your own life, because all our lives are different. Allah made us all different. So Alhamdulillah, we'll go over to the next Sifaat. Now, the Sifaat of Allah is all speaking. Is the slide up?
No.
It's not?
No. I have it on my laptop in front of me though.
Okay. All right, there's it up now, eh? Is it still not on?
Yes, it's on.
Human speech. What does it say?
Human speech.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to go into a long thing about how we speak as human beings. But if we consider what Allah Subhanahu wa Taala gave us as human beings, it's something extremely special which we take for granted. There's no other beings that Allah created that can speak the way we speak on this planet. We are the only ones that can speak in this particular way. And it's the way Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala created, constructed, and designed the human body so that it can actually use this as a means of communicating ideas or concepts or messages or feelings by using speech. We may not know it, but your speech actually comes from your lungs. Your lungs, or let me take one step back. Hearing is the movement of air. I hope we remember that. Sound is created by the air moving back and forth like that and making the eardrums vibrate, which turns it into small signals, which the brain picks up as hearing. Now, can we believe that the human speech generates from the lungs that pressure that comes through all the different parts that make up human speech, your mouth, your tongue, your epiglottis, and all of that. And I'm going to go into much more detail about that. But make an effort to find out how we speak. Go look it up, read up on it, so that you can actually marvel at this ability which we have taken so for granted. They say it takes 100 muscles to utter a simple sentence. All the muscles having to work together to create the ability to say a single sentence. Subhanallah. So think of who is the creator of human speech. And then marvel at that and ask yourself, is Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala not wonderful, awesome, great. So that when we say Allahu Akbar, Allah is great. Allah is the creator of the eyes, the ears, the throat. We say that so easily, but we don't actually know how great human speech really is. Which brings us to the Sifaat of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. Divine speech. Is divine speech, and I'm going to ask a question now, is divine speech something that can be heard? Is divine speech something that can be heard? I'm throwing up the question now.
Because when you read Quran, that's the Kalam of Allah.
We'll come back to that one, Aisha, that it's the Kalam of Allah. Can Allah's, does Allah have a voice?
Nabi Musa spoke to Allah.
He spoke. We are asking about Allah now.
I assumed Allah spoke back to him. Allah spoke to Nabi Musa.
It's one of the Sifaat of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala that Allah possesses divine speech. Speech is the quality of communicating something from one person to another. Now, does Allah have a voice? Muhammad Farid.
I would say Allah is a voice. Allah is not made up of parts. So I would say no.
So Allah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yes, Imam Hussein? Or Amina?
Allah's speech cannot be compared with our speech, because Allah's speech is different to the creation. Laysa kamithli shay, there's nothing like Allah. So Allah's speech is a sort of communication, but not one another.
Okay, let's agree, because now we're testing the subject of Tawhid now. This is one of the ways we are going to test what we know. Alhamdulillah, some of the things that's coming through, whether people knew it, but we're assisting one another to get to know Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala better by applying what we know about the Sifaat of what we've done so far. We mentioned that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is unlike anything in creation. Nothing compares with Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala's, with Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala in any way compares. Muhammad Farid said that Allah is not made up of parts. That is extremely useful information. Now we take that together, that not only, because now we can make a big error. We can make a big error. And that is to say that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala does have a voice, but it's different to that of creation. We mustn't make that mistake. It's like saying Allah has a hand, but the hand is not like a hand in creation. Allah is not made up of parts. Allah is not made up of Allah and a voice, Allah and this and Allah and that, and together that makes Allah. Allah is Allah, with no separation no divisions, no components. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Allah, and it is unknowable to anyone and anything, no matter who they are. So can you get to know Allah? You get to know Allah by understanding His Sifaat properly. And what you people have said now, and what we've gone through so far, helps us to understand, never to make the mistake by comparing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to creation, or saying that Allah's in need, or Allah, because need also means if you are made up of parts, if any part is missing, then the whole is not complete. It will always stand in need. So what we are saying, can you see that on the screen?
No screen with us, Salie.
No screen, ja Allah man, wanneer gaat ek regkom met die besigheid nou? Allahu Akbar, subhanallah. Okay, that must be up now.
There's it with us, Salie. There's a screen now.
Alhamdulillah. What does it say? Allah's speech?
Divine speech.
Yeah, Allah's speech is without words, without letters, without sound. We can never describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's speech. Allah, it's a quality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't ever make the mistake by, because we cannot hear it, say that Allah doesn't speak. Allah doesn't speak the way we speak or the way we understand speech. But speech is supposed to convey a concept of a message or a concept being transferred from one point to another. We do it by using our lungs, our throat, our vocal cords, our tongue in combination that creates speech, which is interpreted by the brain of the next person as the concept. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have a voice like we know voice. So we should not, when Nabi Musa spoke to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we'll come to that one, did Allah speak to him in a voice? No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have a voice like we know a voice. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also doesn't require components to speak to us. And what Imam Hussein said earlier, it is a beginningless and an endless concept, and doesn't determine or doesn't depend on anything in creation. Now comes the question, is the Quran divine speech? Aisha, you posed this question. You said it's the Kalam of Allah, the speech of Allah. How do you now understand, or should you understand, the fact that the Quran comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Nobody denies that, even the child knows that. That we know, we accept that as is. Can we say that that Quran is the speech of Allah? Aisha.
That's always how I thought of it.
And now that we've discussed it a little bit, you're unsure now. Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to give some kind of response can we say the Quran is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
The Quran, the huruf, that is all created. That is not what is from Allah is the communication. The communication that is from Allah, and the communication is without books, without huruf, without sounds, and so forth. It's a communication from Allah.
Malaa'ikah
Farid, you want to add to that?
What happened now?
My brother Wahid or anybody else? Sorry.
No, you go, Farid, and we will ask Brother Waid if he wants to maybe respond, or anyone else. The only reason why I'm pressing on the numbers that I am pressing, because I know they're not shy to respond, because it helps everyone if we ask and we engage and assist one another.
Tamani, you must also ask Shabnam. She's also on.
Yes. No. Okay. Let me ask Shabnam then. Shabnam, would you like to answer the question?
Yes.
Can we say the Quran is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
Yes, I can. I think we can say the Quran is the divine speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But maybe Imam Hussein said that it's the created speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in order to communicate with us.
Yeah. I think if we take all the parts of what people and we put it together, let me put together what most of you have said in one way or the other. Nothing about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be compared or is similar to anything in creation. Nothing. Not only Allah's speech, anything when we speak about Allah can ever be compared to creation. Now, the fact that Allah is communicating with us, you can almost say, I'm not saying it is, you can almost say the Quran is the word of Allah and it is not the word of Allah. When we say it is the word of Allah, or let's rather go to the other part, it's not the word of Allah. The actual book itself has been printed by some publisher somewhere. The letters, the huruf, were human beings' way of communicating in written form to one another. So it was something that human beings created. The sounds, when we generate the sounds to recite the Quran, comes from the way our bodies are composed. So we can never say those words itself, or the huruf, or the letter, or the book itself is Allah's speech. But why we say it is the word of Allah? Because it contains the message of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to communicate to us. The content of what Allah wanted to transfer to us, that is undoubtedly only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the actual book, we respect the book because of what it contains. It contains both the meaning and the script, and should be treated and respected in a way that it's one of the most prized things. What is the great thing about human speech, the Quran? absolute marvelous thing about the Quran is this is how Allah speaks to us directly. It's almost the closest we're going to get to something tangible. That Allah speaks to each one of us directly through this book. Each one can receive the ultimate message. Now, why is it that one person understands more than another person? Or interprets it differently? Or that there might even be contradictions in how people interpret? It's got nothing to do with the message. It's got everything to do with the person and the state of that person's heart. How receptive is the heart to actually receive the true meaning? And one of the things we must realize, Allah has created every single one of us. Every single person was given individual abilities. And Allah knew exactly what Allah created. Allah knew He created somebody that would become a professor, and somebody would become an alim, and somebody would become a street sweeper, or just an ordinary clerk, or whatever. Allah created us all with different abilities. And Allah Subhanahu wa Taala created every single person with the ability to know Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. Not only the clever people, not only the ones who have studied the deen, it has more to do with what type of heart you have and how you receptive you are to getting the true message of what Allah Subhanahu wa Taala wants to communicate to you specifically. To you specifically, there is a personal relationship that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala has with every single slave of His on this dunya, whether he is Muslim or not non-Muslim, whether it is learned or not learned, doesn't matter. Allah knows everything about who was created and what kind of intelligence they were given, what kind of upbringing, what kind of background. So the Quran was created to actually speak to every one of us. We must actually find that connection with that message, because Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala speaks to us. So yes, the Quran represents, probably a better way of expressing it, represents the speech of Allah, but is not the actual speech. We can't say that is the divine speech. The divine speech is the message and the concepts that Allah wanted to communicate to us through this book. I want to leave that one there and just find out before we conclude whether there's anyone who would like to maybe add or anyone wish to maybe get a bit more clarity on one aspect or whatever, and then we'll take it from there, inshallah. Let's hear. Aisha?
I'm just thinking, I'm just thinking why it is said in Kalam of Allah that they must change it and rather say message of Allah. Because it can be confusing if someone don't explain it how you explained it now. I just took it literally. Yeah.
You see, if you must explain the concept the way we are explaining it now, we're going to lose people along the way. We've come to this understanding of how to interpret the Sifaat of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, that Allah actually speaks. How Allah speaks, you must go through all the Sifaat. We're actually supposed to, if we go through the Sifaat of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, then we will be able to not make the mistake. What the previous people, Imam Hussein and Farid in particular, made there was based on their understanding of Tawhid and Sifaat. That's why they could be clear about Allah's not made up of parts and all the other things that were said. So there it shows us how very, very crucial it is for us to understand our Tawhid properly.
Yeah.
And look how to make us understand now better what the Sifaat of Allah, the Kalam of Allah. When somebody recites the Quran, it's the speech of Allah that's being recited by somebody here. You can't say the audio of it is not, but you can't say that the actual recording or the book itself is Allah. We can't get close to who or what Allah is anywhere, anytime.
And but Manie explained there now Nabi Musa and Allah communicated.
Even when Allah communicated with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you see, it's important to realize that our communication in this world is based on our 5 senses. Hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, and so on. We gather information, and all of this, how we touch, how it feels, how it sounds, goes to our brain, it's processed, and that's how we gather knowledge. That's how we understand through our ears and our brain and in combination. At the material level, that's how it works. If you develop along this path that we are hopefully trying to pursue now, of getting closer to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, then what Allah Subhanahu wa Taala does helps you to develop the spiritual counterparts of all your senses. You can develop spiritual hearing. You can develop spiritual sight, speech, smell, touch. That is possible. This is the path that we are on. And the way to reach that is the tazkiyah, the purification of the heart. So, if we look at people being inspired with certain messages, it's not a voice, it's a feeling that falls on your heart, which your mind interprets as that, without any word being exchanged. There's not a single word that's being exchanged, but you have a clear concept of what is falling on your heart. You look at something and you feel something. You see hardship and you feel compassion. Was there a word that was exchanged? But you feel this very clear feeling that you can describe. Even love, even hatred, anger can be triggered without a word being spoken. What that means is that communication doesn't depend on the ears. Communication doesn't depend on the ears. Communication, in certain instances, will depend on the ears, but communication can be achieved through other means as well. And that is that if we look at the wahi, I can't speak too much about that, but I would say that some things that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala wanted to communicate to Rasulullah was via Jibreel, and in other instances, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala spoke to Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam directly. For example, on Mi'raj, We're talking about spiritual experiences that we should interpret not at the physical level. The moment we think about how the world operates and how we understand things here, and we get locked into that, we're actually blocking ourselves of making progress at the spiritual level. So in the case of Nabi Musa, Allah communicated with him by putting clearly to him what Allah wanted him to know. He wanted to see Allah. Allah said, if this mountain can withstand just a glimpse of my nur, and then what happened? There was no more mountain. That is another example of Tawhid, that Allah is not visible to us ever, under any circumstances, not even to the prophets. So what can I say? I want to conclude on that note and just give a slight idea of what the next area would be. Let's hear if there's any final points that we would like to make at this stage.
Yes, Puta Salie. There was a group of people in the past called the Mu'tazilas. They also couldn't understand this issue that the Quran is uncreated. To them, the Quran was like a book created, the words were created, and you know, they persecuted people that went against this theory of theirs. Like Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal was thrown into jail. You know, they forced the people to accept the view. This was in the rule of the Abbasid period. And Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal stuck to his guns that the Quran is not created. It's uncreated speech of Allah.
Yeah.
So people are still misunderstanding this point today.
Inshallah, in fact, what we hope to come to later, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows, inshallah, we will come to the different types of beliefs, like the Qadariya, the Jabariya, and the Mu'tazila, and the Ahli Sunni wal Jama'ah. What is the difference between these beliefs? And we'll become a lot more clear when we say we are. Ek is a Sunni, I'm from the Ahli Sunni wal Jama'ah. Do we really understand what we are saying, and why are we different from what others are saying, and what is the difference between our belief and their belief? We're talking now about believing in Allah and His Sifaat and His Tawhid and His Aqidah. Those things must be understood properly. So inshallah, we're going to touch on that, but shukran Imam Hussein. But hopefully for us, we will understand the content of the Quran comes directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It comes from nowhere else. So that the content, the substance, but the actual physical book itself, we can't say this is the speech of Allah, what is contained in it. But let's leave it for now. On that note, let me just say that what we hope to do is, without going into too much detail, we're going to
monotheism.
There's
affirmative
conceptual. There was the first Sifaat was wujud, right? Then there were 5 negating Sifaat. Then there were the 7 conceptual Sifaat, and this was the last of the 7. So how many do we have? Farid, JC, principal for the school. So 1
13.
plus 5 plus 7.
13.
Kijk, Imam Hussein is amper 2 keer jou ouderdom en hy het dit vinniger uitgewerk. These young people, Imam Hussein, if they don't have a calculator, they can't. 13. Imam Hussein is right. Let's just repeat what it is. The first was the self Sifaat, wujud, the existence, the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the 5 negating ones, beginningless, endless, and so on. Then the conceptual attributes, power, knowledge, and so on. And the last one was Kalam, 13. Then we're going to go to the 7 affirmative conceptual attributes. We're not going to go into detail. And that will conclude on the 20 Sifaat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll just briefly touch on those things that are not possible for Allah, which is basically the opposite of what we've already done. So that's not going to hopefully be too long a session. But then what we will come to, inshallah, we will come to the understanding, which is part of our belief system of Tawhid, that good and bad comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll come to cause and effect, that Allah has created the person and the person's actions. We're going to come, inshallah, hopefully also to the understanding of how to understand the concept of Allah has decreed certain things and how that fits in with the concept of punishment and reward. And we hope, inshallah, that Allah will give us the time to complete these things. And for those people who joined us later, at the beginning we discussed it, and we felt in order to accommodate everyone that as from next week, inshallah, we'll still have our sessions on Sunday at 2:30, inshallah. And on a Wednesday, we will move our slot to 4 o'clock, inshallah. So if that is acceptable, well, even if it's not acceptable, we've now agreed. This is not a democracy, or not too democratic. We participatory, but we're not completely democratic. We also have to be at times autocratic. So the law is, we have decided amongst ourselves, for those of you who are late, that we're going to do it in that way, inshallah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. We thank you sincerely, and we hope that up to now that you have found the sessions useful, and may Allah make it possible for us not just to sit in sessions and be dazzled by the new information, but actually take this information quietly on your own and to become better people. And to become better people, the biggest, quickest way of becoming better people, 2 ways. Have a soft heart, a compassionate heart, and try and be good towards everyone you meet, Muslim or non-Muslim, a sinner or a pious person. Try and be good to all people and everything that's been created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then Allah will become pleased with us. And if Allah becomes pleased with us, Allah start opening the doors and lifting the veils, and Allah will pour in your heart true knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah make us of those fortunate slaves who will taste that true knowledge, inshallah. Ameen, 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 Ya Rabbal Alameen. The owner and the creator of the entire, not universe, of all the worlds, not only the universe. We said uni comes from the word one. Scientists have now spoken about the multiverse. They've discovered multi means many universes. They're grappling with that concept. But Allah has told us long ago, there's not only this one universe, there are many other worlds. May Allah, the owner of all those worlds, shower His nur and His barakah on us, our families, and make it easy for us in these difficult and trying times. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. we're going to ask Muhammad Farid to make the closing dua for us, inshallah.
الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا مولانا محمد صلاة تنجينا بها جميع الأحوال والآفات وتقضي لنا بها جميع الحاجات وتطهرنا بها جميع السيئات وترفعنا بها عندك على الدرجات وتبلغنا بها أقصى الغايات من جميع الخيرات في الحياة وبعد الممات إنك على كل شيء قدير. إلى حضرة سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. رب اغفر لي ولوالدي آمين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. جزاكم الله خير.
Shukran jazilan, Muhammad Farid. May Allah Subhanahu wa Taala be pleased with you.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum. Shukran for today's lesson.
Alhamdulillah.
I have a lot to think about now.
Yeah, so true. Informative and amazing. Kan ik ook maar iets zien, Kanala?
Yes, of course.
Informative, alhamdulillah. Om oor te tafakkur en een mens kan nie Allah se ni'mat stel nie. So as 'n mens nou dink van tamaan, you know, alles wat ons nou geleer het en gesê het van even van ons self, ons kan hoor, ons kan sien, ons kan ja Allah. But anyway, shukran tamaan.
Shukran for those kind words. Shukran. Okay.
Tamani,
Yes.
maybe a suggestion, maybe something that will help us with our tafakkur, because it's something that maybe needs to be guided, and maybe we haven't had a chance to practice upon it yet. So maybe with our tafakkur on our own, with our own thoughts, with our own questions that we have, maybe we can discuss it in the class, in the beginning of the class, and maybe before we start, discuss the questions that we have and check with Manie if was Imam Hussein, was everybody, if it makes sense, if it agrees, you know, with our certain questions that we have. For example, now after the class, immediately now, we have a thought that pondered about my mind regarding, for example, the Quran. So I had a simple question is, why did Allah choose that a Quran as a means for us? Now that's just a question, but I need time to answer it and go through it and see it, and maybe we can discuss it, and those type of the tafakkur and the discussions, that is the way which we will inshallah improve and go forward.
Yeah, and I want to thank you also for your role that you've played. I've used you without consulting you, but I have some idea of what kind of heart I'm speaking to. But this interaction makes it different for us, where we can learn from one another. We pose questions and we think we understand, and then suddenly we realize we don't fully understand. And by interacting and engaging,